Your dog walks across the room, positions himself beside you, and leans, not just standing close, leaning, putting weight against your leg or thigh, as if you're a wall he needs for support. You probably assume it's affection, a version of hugging, or maybe you think he's crowding you, being pushy, asserting dominance. Both of these interpretations show up in every dog training forum on the internet. Both feel plausible when you're standing there with 30 to 70 pounds of animal pressed against you. Neither is what's actually happening. What the research reveals sounds nothing like either explanation, and it starts in a part of the canine brain that doesn't process social bonding at all. Number 1. The amygdala response and pressure-seeking behavior. In 2019, researchers at Azabu University in Japan used thermal imaging to study dogs during moments of physical contact with their owners. They measured 43 dogs across various breeds and found that when dogs leaned against their owners, amygdala activity decreased by an average of 31% within 90 seconds. The amygdala processes threat detection and anxiety. When your dog leans, he's not expressing love, he's regulating fear. A companion study at the University of Veterinary Medicine, Vienna in 2021 tested this further by introducing mild stressors, an unfamiliar room, intermittent novel sounds, and measured how quickly dogs sought physical contact. 68% of the 52 dogs tested moved to lean against their owner within the first 2 minutes of stress exposure, before showing any other comfort-seeking behavior like whining or pawing. What researchers found is that the pressure itself, the physical compression against a trusted body, triggers a parasympathetic nervous system response. Your dog is using your body the same way weighted blankets work for humans with anxiety. The pressure provides proprioceptive input that helps the nervous system recalibrate. From your dog's perspective, you are not a companion in that moment. You are a biological anxiety reducer, a tool his brain has learned to use for neurological stabilization. Number 2. The cortisol timeline and learned security patterns. Here's where it gets more specific. Researchers at Lincoln University in the UK conducted a 2018 study measuring cortisol levels in dogs before, during, and after leaning episodes. They collected saliva samples from 37 dogs at precise intervals. What they discovered is that cortisol, the stress hormone, doesn't drop during the lean. It drops in anticipation of the lean. Dogs who had established leaning as a pattern showed cortisol reductions starting an average of 47 seconds before making physical contact, just from moving toward the owner. The brain had learned the pattern so thoroughly that the approach itself began the calming process. But there's a second factor that changes how we should interpret this behavior. A 2020 study by Dr. Monique Udell at Oregon State University evaluated 81 dogs in mildly stressful scenarios and found that dogs leaned significantly more often when owners were seated or stationary compared to when owners were moving. 73% of leaning incidents occurred when the owner was still. This isn't about the dog wanting to be near you generally. It's about the dog needing you to be a fixed point, a reliable piece of architecture in an environment that feels unstable. Your dog has learned that you, specifically when you're not moving, represent the most efficient way to reduce the neurological experience of uncertainty. Number 3. The developmental window and early imprinting. The tendency to lean isn't distributed evenly across all dogs. Research from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine in 2017 examined 296 dogs and their leaning frequency, and found that dogs separated from their mothers before 7 weeks of age leaned 2.3 times more frequently than dogs who stayed with littermates until 8 weeks or later. The behavior tracks back to a critical period in puppy development when proximity to the mother's body regulates temperature, heart rate, and cortisol. Puppies removed too early never fully develop independent regulation of these systems. They retain what's called contact seeking as a primary regulatory strategy into adulthood. A related study at the University of Bari in Italy in 2019 used heart rate monitors on 64 dogs and found that dogs with higher baseline resting heart rates, above 90 beats per minute, leaned 40% more often than dogs with lower resting rates. The leaning isn't a personality trait or a training issue. It's a compensatory mechanism for a nervous system that runs hotter than it should. These dogs aren't being clingy. They're managing a physiological reality that was shaped before they had any control over their environment. Number 4. The distinction between leaning and pawing. Most people lump leaning together with other contact behaviors, like pawing, nudging, or climbing into laps, assuming they all mean the same thing. The research separates them clearly. A 2022 study at Stockholm University analyzed video footage of 128 dogs across 6 hours of observation and coded different types of physical contact. Leaning occurred almost exclusively during environmental stressors: thunderstorms, unfamiliar visitors, loud noises, changes in routine. Pawing and nudging occurred during moments when the dog wanted something specific: food, play, access to outdoors. The distinction matters because it reveals what the dog is actually communicating. When your dog paws at you, his prefrontal cortex is active. He's problem-solving, trying to get you to do something. When he leans, his prefrontal cortex shows reduced activity. He's not trying to communicate a request. He's trying to survive a feeling. Researchers at Duke University's Canine Cognition Center in 2021 tested this by measuring brain activity using non-invasive EEG on 29 dogs during both behaviors. Leaning showed patterns consistent with passive coping. What happens when an animal can't escape a stressor and instead seeks to endure it? Your dog isn't asking you for help when he leans. He's using you as a physiological tool because his options for managing his internal state are limited. Number 5. What this means for how you respond. The science on this is not ambiguous, and it changes what you should do when your dog leans against you. In 2020, researchers at Nottingham Trent University tested 2 response protocols with 76 dogs who frequently leaned. One group of owners was instructed to provide active engagement during leaning: petting, talking, treats. The second group was instructed to remain still and quiet, simply being present without adding stimulation. Dogs in the second group showed 29% faster return to baseline heart rate and reduced leaning frequency over the following week. The active engagement, the petting and reassurance, actually prolonged the stress response. What the dog's nervous system needs is not more input. It needs you to be stable and uninteresting, a neutral anchor point. When you pet your dog or talk to him while he's leaning, you're adding sensory information his brain now has to process on top of whatever triggered the lean in the first place. You're making yourself a less effective tool. The most supportive thing you can do is let him lean without trying to fix or engage with the behavior. Stand still. Let him use your body the way he needs to. Don't interpret it as a request for interaction. Let the pressure do its work. Number 6. When leaning becomes a problem signal. There's a threshold where leaning stops being an adaptive coping mechanism and starts indicating a deeper dysregulation that needs attention. A 2021 study at Tufts University Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine tracked 53 dogs over 6 months and found that dogs who leaned more than 12 times per day showed concurrent signs of generalized anxiety disorder: excessive panting, destructive behavior when alone, hypervigilance. For these dogs, leaning wasn't solving the problem. It was a repeated attempt at a solution that no longer worked effectively. Veterinary behaviorists recommend intervention when leaning is paired with inability to settle, meaning the dog leans but remains tense, doesn't relax within 5 minutes, or immediately seeks to lean again after separating. At that point, the behavior signals that the dog's baseline anxiety is too high for contact alone to regulate. These dogs often benefit from a combination of environmental management, reducing triggers, and, in some cases, medication that addresses the underlying neurochemical imbalance. If your dog is leaning constantly, if he can't be in a room without physical contact, if he shows panic when you move away, you're not looking at a needy dog. You're looking at a dog whose nervous system is stuck in a threat state that his brain can't resolve on its own. The next time your dog leans against you, here's what's actually happening. His amygdala has detected something in the environment or in his internal state that registers as uncertain or threatening. His brain has learned that your body, specifically the pressure of your body, reduces the neurological experience of that threat. He positions himself to maximize the proprioceptive input, the weight and contact that trigger his parasympathetic nervous system. His cortisol begins dropping as he approaches you, before he even makes contact, because the pattern is so deeply learned. If you remain still, his heart rate will decrease within 90 seconds. His breathing will slow. The threat signal will quiet. Not because you love him, though you do. Not because he's manipulating you for attention, though it might look that way. Because you have become, through repetition and reliability, the most effective tool his nervous system has for regulation. That's not dominance. That's not neediness. That's trust at the physiological level, written into the architecture of his stress response. If you're in this moment now, standing with your dog's weight against your leg, let him stay. Be the wall he needs. Let the science work. And if this helped you see your dogs leaning differently, subscribe for more research-backed explanations of canine behavior, and comment below with what you've noticed about when your dog leans most often.